Hello, and welcome back to The Empowered Resilient Woman, a podcast that supports all women on the journey to becoming their most resilient self in life and in business. I'm your host, Kimberly Smith. Thanks so much for being here. Today is a very special topic, a topic that actually I have been planning on having an episode dedicated to since I first had the idea to have a podcast. So it's a big deal. And I know that so many of you are going to relate to this topic. We are talking about perfectionism, specifically though, perfectionist problems and the sneaky ways that perfectionism can really hold you back in life. And it's funny because for the longest time, I myself thought of perfectionism as a really positive thing. And I think a lot of people do have this mentality still that they pride themselves on this perfectionist identity, that they have to have everything perfect, that they're a high achiever, that they have high expectations, and that is like the key to their success and achievement in life. And I just think that after you listen to this episode, you're going to have some different thoughts on the matter. So let's dive in. I want to first kind of share a little bit about my perfectionist journey, because for those of you who haven't known me all my life, other than my siblings and my parents, I was not a perfectionist since the very beginning. Little Kimberly was actually the anti-perfectionist. I was probably a mediocre achiever. I definitely wasn't a straight A student. I didn't play sports. I was a little bit of a wallflower, a little bit of a, theater nerd, a little bit of a black sheep, right? And I'm okay saying that. It's totally fine, right? But I got to this point in my life, after I graduated high school, where I was going off to college. I was starting my, new adult life, and I felt like I could really reinvent myself. And college was a big deal. Number one, because for a long time, I wasn't sure that I would actually go to college. I applied to 3 schools. I only got into one. And that's where I ended up going. I didn't even see the place until I was driving onto campus to move in. So I wasn't necessarily the planner that I am today. But when I started my college career, I knew that I wanted to do things differently. I really was there on my own dime. I had student loans and I couldn't really afford to fuck around. So I got down to business. I focused on my studies. I actually ended up losing a lot of weight at one point in my college career. I lost about 40 pounds. And I was getting really excellent grades. I was on the dean's list. And I was starting to get all of this really positive feedback from all of the people in my life, my cousins, my aunts and uncles, my, just all my friends, I could tell my mom was talking more, she had more pride when she talked about me, right? Not that she didn't before, because, parents love their kids all equally. And she definitely does. But there wasn't a lot to really boast about, and I'm just being honest here. But then when I started to achieve all these things and hit all these milestones and accomplish all these goals, I was like, wow, it gave me confidence. It also gave me affirmation too, maybe a little too much affirmation, that if I did X, Y, and Z, right? If I was thin and pretty and had good grades, then I would earn the love and respect of other people, right? I didn't have to be that wallflower anymore. I could be somebody who I was proud of. I don't think it was about being like the center of attention or anything like that, but it was about feeling recognized and feeling proud. And that's a good thing. I think we all should really feel that way. It all kind of fed into the culture and society that we live in. That is exactly what we live in, right? We live in a very shame-inducing culture that says that if you're not a certain way, if you're not perfect in these ways, if you don't check all the boxes, then you're not good enough. right? And that's why so many of us struggle with our worth. And that's why I struggled with mine. And I think as women, we always have kind of those little hiccups. There's days where I don't feel great about myself and, have those perfectionist thoughts that run through my head and I've got to course correct. It took a lot of deep work on my mindset, on my soul, just getting back in touch with my authentic self to really get to a place where I can recognize those perfectionist tendencies when I start to fall into them and pull myself out before I get into some big mental spiral, right? So if you're not sure if you're a perfectionist, we're going to dive into that too. But, you may be perfectionist in certain ways, maybe not that you've been all your entire life, but maybe in certain atmospheres, around certain groups of people, maybe it's around your family, just different audiences, right? Maybe you're a perfectionist at work, but at home, not so much. So perfectionism can really show up in lots of different ways. But first, we're going to talk about where perfectionism comes from, right? In my instance, I think mine was very cultural, right? It was very experiential too, because I was experiencing things that were telling me in this subconscious way that I needed to keep up this image, right, of perfection in order to get what I wanted, in order to, get attention from the guys and to have a boyfriend and to get jobs and to, do all these things, right? I needed to be a certain way. Perfectionism, when it comes down to it, is really a form of self-protection. Okay. So somewhere along the line, us perfectionists, we learned that there's negative consequences when we underperform or when we don't do things well enough, right? Maybe it's when we make a mistake, when we, we don't put our best foot forward, whatever it is, there's disappointment, there's disapproval, there's rejection, there's all of these negative emotions, right? When you let somebody down, and maybe that was in your power, maybe it wasn't, right? I mean, so many things that happen are circumstantial and not actually related, or there's not a direct correlation between the effort that you put into things, right? So somewhere along the line, we learned that there's negative consequences when we underperform. And so in order to outsmart the system, we want to just make sure that we're perfect at everything so that we don't ever have to risk feeling those negative feelings, right? So that's number one. It's a form of self-protection. It's also kind of this anxious avoidant behavior because we want to avoid all of those negative emotions. And so oftentimes we end up avoiding new situations and new things, new opportunities even, or just things that we're not sure that we can do perfectly. Those things that make you anxious naturally, you're going to avoid them because, you don't want to feel those feelings. You don't want to feel rejected. You don't want to disappoint the people in your life. So you're going to kind of push them off. You're going to avoid them. And that's actually what leads to procrastination. So perfectionism and procrastination are highly correlated, inexplicably linked for sure. So that's just, some of my thoughts about where things come from, right? That we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to avoid, making mistakes, basically. So how do you know if you are a perfectionist? Well, most likely if you are a perfectionist, you know that you are in certain ways, right? But here are some behaviors that definitely, speak to my soul and I've observed in other people. I've done a lot of research on this topic itself. So these are from different sources, but different behaviors that we exude when we are a perfectionist. Typically, we are very high energy. We might even have a little bit of pent up energy. We rush around. We try to accommodate other people. We want to make sure other people are comfortable. We're great problem solvers. That's for fuck's sure, right? Like we love a problem. We want to be the person that saves the day. It makes us feel useful. It gives us that affirmation that we're good enough. But then on the flip side of the coin, we also have this very black and white thinking, right? This very all or nothing thinking that, well, if I'm not sure that I can do that perfectly, or do it the way that I think it should be done, or the way that I think somebody else thinks it should be done, then I'm just not going to do it. Right. It's kind of like when a lot of people on their health and wellness journey, people say all the time, we hear 20-minute walk is better than nothing. Right. But we have this idea in our head that we've got to have the perfect outfit, and we've got to have the perfect shoes, and we've got to have the perfect gym membership, and we've got to, spend the perfect hour and a half or the perfect 90 minutes doing, cardio and then weights and all this stuff. And if I can't do that huge workout, then I'm just going to sit on the couch. Fuck it. Right. So there's that all or nothing, black and white, right or wrong thinking, right? There's a lot of judgment in there, a lot of self-judgment. Other behaviors too are that we have no limits. We have no boundaries. So while we have very black and white thinking, or very, all or nothing thinking, the all in, right, can lead us to overworking ourselves, to burning ourselves out, neglecting our basic needs, even just hydration and using the restroom, for goodness sakes, right? Like, you deserve to take a fucking break. If you're listening to this and you're at work and you have not stood up in the last 60 to 90 minutes, get up, get some headphones and start walking, right? Like, move around. So, we neglect ourselves for the sake of, continuing to do our best and put in all our effort and win other people's approval. We have this unrelenting desire to prove ourselves so we can be a little bit competitive. Sometimes it's competition with other people. Sometimes it's just we're in competition with ourselves. That's me. That's who I am. And we struggle with this concept of enough. We struggle with knowing when we can really let go and relax and be okay and feel at ease. Being calm, resting, it's usually really hard for a perfectionist because we feel like our worth is tied to productivity, which it isn't. So at the core of perfectionism, right, when we break it down, when we look at what we're getting in return, when we put all of this time and energy out into the world, it's really that we have this desire to be loved and accepted, and we're trying to fit in, and we're trying to feel like we belong. And man, I mean, that just it just makes my heart hurt in a way, right? Because I have so much compassion for my younger self who was trying to make it, who was trying to find her way and would do anything to get there, right? She would even sacrifice herself. So, and here comes the question too, because oftentimes perfectionism, there's these shades of gray between, well, how do I know if I'm just doing my best or whether I'm sliding into perfectionism and it's starting to be a problem, right? So what is the tipping point of where perfectionism can become self-destructive or even a form of self-sabotage, right? Let me just say that there are times where you are going to have to keep working on something because it's not done, right? It's not at that place where maybe it is finished, right? There's that saying done is better than perfect. And yes, to a degree, that is true. But there's a certain level of quality of work, right? When you're at your job, when you're doing certain tasks that you can't just, half-ass it, right? Sometimes, right? If something's not do or die, yeah, maybe you can put in some mediocre effort and that's fine, right? Doing the laundry, all that stuff, your laundry doesn't have to be folded perfectly. It doesn't have to be lined up perfectly. Your plates, in your jars and your pantry don't have to be looking like they're an army, marching away. Things can be a little off. They can be a little messy, but with certain tasks, you are going to have to keep putting in effort to refine that skill, or you may even have to do it again because it didn't come out the way that you wanted. And it's not your best work. And we all want to be proud of our work, and that's okay, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing. I've had a lot of experiences like this, right? When I'm practicing a presentation, or even I've re-recorded presentations because it wasn't my best go at it, right? And I had the time, I had the energy. I felt like that those couple practice runs were great and I was going to nail it that third time. I've definitely done that. I've re-recorded podcast episodes because I needed to rearrange some of the content, or it didn't flow the way I thought it should flow so that it was ideal for somebody listening, right? Those things are fine. Here are the red flags when it becomes a problem, right? When does perfectionist become a problem? It becomes a problem when you start to make unauthentic choices in your life because you're fearful about how other people see you or how they will judge you, what they will say behind your back. It becomes a problem when you pass up opportunities because you aren't sure you can do it perfectly, or you're afraid of making a mistake along the way. And also when you neglect yourself, right? Like if we're so focused on a project that we are neglecting ourselves, our health, for the sake of others, for the sake of, being there and, doing what we need to do, or doing what we think we need to do because we think people can't survive without us, that's a red flag, right? If we're neglecting other responsibilities in our life for the sake of just one specific task or one specific project or commitment, and we're letting everything else just kind of crumble, that's a problem, right? If you're putting all of your effort into your career, but you're neglecting your home life and your partner and all of these things, like that's the type of stuff that happens, right? People have this facade, they go out into the world, everybody thinks they've got their shit together. And then behind closed doors, they're just, roommates with their partner, they have a terrible relationship with their kids or like whatever, right? So these are the red flags. And that's when you know that you're kind of in this danger zone of needing to just reassess, right? Needing to reprioritize, maybe needing to set some boundaries in place for yourself. Perfectionism is a problem for a lot of reasons, right? It creates so much self-judgment. You start to mentally abuse yourself. That's where your inner dialogue starts to get carried away, because if you are thinking to yourself that you are a piece of shit because you made a mistake at work, or, you're lamenting about the fact that you can't go for that promotion because you don't have the skills, and, Susie Smith over there, she's so much better than you and whatever, like you are just creating these thought patterns in your brain that are so unproductive. Number one, they're a huge distraction from all the things that you need to be doing and the things that are earning or are worthy of your time and attention. And you're making yourself feel bad, right? You're making yourself feel horrible by judging yourself. And then also if you're judging other people because they're not living up to your standards, the whole gossiping thing, right? Like it's very 1990. I think we need to get past that, ladies. So, perfectionism, it's a problem. It creates a lot of self-judgment. It creates unattainable and unrealistic expectations for yourself, for other people. It perpetuates this idea that we all hate, right? That we need to be a certain thing, that we need to live our lives in a certain way. There's so many different lifestyles that you could choose out there. There's so many different things that you could choose to do with your career or within a partnership or just your purpose in life, right? And none of them are better than the other, right? It's like we have this idea that some things fall into the good category and some things are just like, right? Not so. So it smashes this individualism that we all want. It smashes authenticity. It takes that away from us when we're trying to contort ourselves and, assimilate. It's not good for anybody. It also creates fear around making mistakes and ultimately trying new things. And, that could be something at work. It could be something in your dating life. It could be, just anything, right? A new hobby, any new passion, right? I mean, shit, on my journey to becoming a coach and writing and, now producing this podcast, like there are so many times where I could have said like, oh no, I don't know how to do that. Like, oh no, I'm not cut out for that. Right. Well, shit, like I don't regret anything. And I've made a ton of mistakes along the way. Mistakes are not a bad thing. Perfectionism also creates shame for things that you think are wrong with you. Shame around your appearance, shame around past mistakes. And this clouds your mindset in the present moment. Like I said, it's a huge distraction. That's why I think so many people have a hard time practicing presence, is because you're so all up in your head, right? You're thinking about, what happened last night, what happened at work last week. You're ruminating on conversations that you had that maybe left you feeling a little uneasy. And you're writing the script to this, I don't know, you're writing the story that hasn't, not even close to happen yet. And it's a huge mental distraction, right? It can even prevent you from getting the help you need in some situations, right? Because take mental health, right? There's a huge stigma around mental health, going to therapy, all the things. I mean, we've come so far, and I'm a huge advocate for therapy of any kind. I love my therapist. Best thing that I ever did was walk my ass into there in 2017. And, we've been together ever since. We've lived happily ever after. But a lot of people might not reach out to a therapist because, oh my gosh, what will people think? What if my parents find out? What if my partner finds out? What if my best friend finds out and she feels like slighted because, why couldn't I come to her and talk about these things? There's so many narratives that could be going on, right? And when it comes to mental health, that's a prime example, because people have all types of things that they are coping with on a daily basis. And, your family and friends are great, but they are not necessarily the best people to be confiding in sometimes. They're not the most objective people, right? So those services are necessary. And if you are going to judge yourself and beat yourself up because of perfectionism, because you're afraid of what other people think, and you're not going to get the help that you need, that's a slippery slope. Perfectionism also limits creativity. It limits innovation. It limits fun, right? Because you're so worried about what other people are thinking that, and this image that you need to uphold, that you can never let loose, that you can never just relax. They can never just like go with the flow. And man, that sounds like a sad life. It really, really does. And I think about too, perfectionism being a problem because, of course, like all of these individual things, the judgment, the fear, the shame, the, not getting the services you need, the limits on your creativity and your fun, and being that carefree person that I know we all crave to continue to be, right? From when we were maybe young adults and had less responsibilities. More than that, right? Because all of those things impact us. What is the impact personally and professionally and on our health, right? That's probably the biggest one, on our health and on our relationships, of having so much fear and so much judgment in the mind and in the body, right? They say that your thoughts and your beliefs, they trigger chemicals within your body, in your biology, that and there's a great book, it's called The Body Keeps the Score, right? So when you think a thought and you feel a feeling, like there's all of these chemicals that start firing in your brain and, coursing through your veins, and your body remembers that, right? Like they're almost like mini traumas that you are doing to yourself by putting yourself through this anguish day in and day out, right? It's not worth it. Like there's a better way. So these are the problems. These are the problems that add up and can really cause you. I mean, nobody wants to regret like not living their life the way that they want to live it. And, we all make decisions with other people in mind. But if your whole identity, if your whole world, if like your big life decisions are revolving around everybody but yourself, I think you've got to do some soul searching. right? So, I mean, I know because I've been there. So here comes then, like, what do you do? What do you do if you know that you have these perfectionist tendencies, that you know that they kind of keep coming up and they're causing a problem, and you see that, right? Because we get to a point where you got to admit, right, that it's not just everybody else, that you've got to start making different choices. So when it comes to overcoming perfectionism, and I say overcoming loosely, right? What I really mean by overcoming perfectionism is working with perfectionism. How can you work with it? How can you shift it? How can you become just more in tune to yourself by understanding how these behavioral patterns keep showing up for you in your life? And the first one, of course, is awareness. It's radical self-honesty. You have to be able to say, yes, I'm a perfectionist. Yes, this is causing a problem. Yes, these things speak to me. And you have to also separate yourself from this idea that perfectionism is the key to you being successful, right? At times in my life, and when I spoke about my early, being in college and whatever, I was very goal oriented. Perfectionism at that point in my life, it actually served me quite well, right? And at certain points and with certain things, it will serve you well. And also it can be your downfall, right? It can be a bottleneck to all the things that you're trying to go after. So you have to let go of this identity that you've built around being a perfectionist and shift it to something new, right? You have to forgive yourself as well. Give yourself a lot of self-compassion every single day, right? It's all about practice in real life, in real time. In those moments, you have to be able to catch yourself and your internal dialogue going on a tangent, beating yourself up. And you have to first tell yourself, like literally, if you have to say out loud, it's okay. I forgive you. It's all right. We're going to move forward. We're going to have a better day. It was just a bad morning, right? Or this is just a hurdle. We're going to get past this. This doesn't define you. Whatever you need to say to yourself, whatever you would say to a friend, do it. Practice it. Oftentimes too, in these situations with perfectionism, we're trying to control something. We're trying to control an outcome. We're trying to, like I said earlier, outsmart the system and outsmart any negative emotions or whatever. Yeah, that is life, y'all, right? Like I think about this with my daughter a lot too, because as a parent, you want to protect your kids from disappointment, from heartache, and you can't. Right? And you can't protect yourself from heartache or disappointment either. It is a part of it, right? Risk and reward. You take the risk and you will be rewarded, or you will learn from it on the other side. That's it. And, so what are you trying to control in these situations? If you can ask yourself that, then you can maybe also see what you're afraid of. And if you know what you're afraid of, then you can kind of talk to yourself and figure out, well, if that did happen, what would be the worst outcome, right? Would my world end? Would the world end? No, it would not, right? Things would keep moving. You would figure it out. You would try again. It wouldn't be the end of the world. Also, you have to be able to identify where you need boundaries in your life, boundaries in your relationships, boundaries with your working life, boundaries with your kids. It's okay to not pour every ounce of your time and energy into other people. It is okay. You should be filling your cup constantly. And it's interesting because as a perfectionist, we oftentimes have this we have a hard time understanding when we've put in enough effort into these external things and external people, except when it comes to ourselves. We actually underestimate, in most cases, how much time we need for things, how much self-care we're going to need, just meeting our basic needs. Like I said, we underestimate that. We're like totally cool with running on the bare minimum, but we want to like overgive to all of these other things. That doesn't make a lick of sense. So, keeping these things in mind, coming back to them, maybe even re-listening to this podcast, that can help kind of soak things in and help you be more aware, help you forgive yourself on a deeper level, be more compassionate, realize what you're trying to control in situations or what you're so afraid of, and give yourself more rest and time to enjoy your life. Letting go of perfectionism is not about lowering the bar and settling, right? And I think a lot of people think that, oh, well, and this is an example of that all or nothing thinking, right? We're going to go from doing it all and being perfect to being like a lazy loser on the couch, right? Like, hello, there's like 1,000 different degrees in between. So let's not, go all the way to the end of the spectrum here. You can lower your bar and still do your best, right? You have to just realize that doing your best, it changes from day to day. Sometimes hour to hour, sometimes minute to minute. You have to pay attention to just your personal bar, nobody else's. Don't give a shit what else anybody is doing. Don't get wrapped up in other people's drama, right? And you have to understand that sometimes it's okay to change and shift your standards and your expectations. Sometimes maybe you have set unattainable expectations for yourself, right? And for others. And you have to learn to implement grace, right? Grace for yourself, grace for others, make those adjustments at any given time with no judgment, right? Like you can't say, okay, well, yeah, I need to, it's okay to do less this time. Man, I am such an idiot, right? Like you can't tack that onto the end of it. Yeah, again, have to come back to being gentle and compassionate and forgiving to yourselves. Many times it's really just hard to see these things on our own because we have blind spots, right? We have pride. We don't want to let go of who we are or who we've been because it's vulnerable to put our bets on that future person that we haven't even met yet, right? So oftentimes it takes working with a coach or therapist to really show you these areas, to bring them to your attention, to help you practice these things in real life. Letting go of the past and taking responsibility for yourself and your life in the present, that is the key to personal expansion, right? To all the things that you want in life, to everything that you want to achieve in your career, in your personal life, in your relationships with your kids, like all of your dreams. That is personal expansion. And it's only going to happen if you can let go of the things that are holding you back. So you've got to learn to work with your personal characteristics, starting with awareness, right? Starting with shifting your mindset and beliefs. And that is what is going to allow you to change your behavior, your actions, the big actions, the small actions. They are integral to your journey. And you have to let go of the stuff that's holding you back. So learning to break these behavioral patterns like perfectionism, that's what's going to lead you to those new inspired actions, to that new identity. That is what is going to be the catalyst to your success, no matter how you define it. So no matter what you want, that's it right there, right? That's what you got to do. And it seems simple, and it is, if you don't fight it, right? If you stop resisting what is part of your natural growth journey, and you continue to notice and shift and be gentle with yourself, you will make progress in the right direction. And that adds up. It's not going to happen overnight, but it adds up. Little by little, the bird builds her nest. And this is where you need to remember that you don't need to do it alone, right? You don't have to prove anything to anybody. You don't have to be this perfectionist superwoman who does it all on her own. You're allowed to take the shortcut. You're allowed and you should use your resources. And if this speaks to you and you're looking for support to take your life, career, or business to the next level, and you're ready to make that investment in yourself to make it happen, please reach out, book a free discovery call. Let's chat about how coaching with me can help you get there. And I promise you, it's a lot easier than you think. And it's going to save you a hell of a lot of time and money. And you can bet your ass that we're going to actually have a lot of fun while you crush your goals. The last thing that I will say here is a book recommendation. And that is by one of my favorites, Brene Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection. Amazing book. amazing book. I think everybody should read it. So get your copy and read it today. All right. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Empowered Resilient Woman. Thank you again for listening and being here. Of course, I've just received so many kind texts and emails and messages about just loving the podcast. So that's great. If you have an idea for a topic, please DM me, send me a text if you've got my number. And yeah, well, let's make it happen. So go ahead, share it on social media, take a screenshot, tag me at kimberly.brook.smith on Instagram so I can repost it and say thank you, because I appreciate it. And it is so, so helpful. Also, if you have a perfectionist friend out there and you're trying to give them that subtle hint that they need to get their shit together, feel free to send it to them as well. So I hope you're all having an amazing day. Sending you lots of love and lots of support. As always, I'm here for you. Keep shining, and I will chat with you again soon. Take it easy.